Chapter 45, Chapter 7, Part I. Chapter 7. The Sun Soul in the Shadow. Dark Dimension. 12 o'clock midnight. After a moment the smoke finally died away and drifted off. Mario's eyes were tearing up as he coughed and tried to wave the remaining smoke away. Once he had succeeded, he rubbed his eyes and looked around. And saw, for the first time, where they were. It was a dark, barren wasteland. The ground beneath them was dry and cracked, and the only sign that anything had ever lived there was a few dried-up shrubs and dead trees sticking up here and there. But the strangest thing about the land was its color. Rather than being covered in the nighttime darkness, the trees, the grass, the ground were all eerily pale, almost white, as though they were part of a film negative. However bad that was, the sky was worse. It looked unnaturally huge and vaulting, and it was pitch black. Blacker than Mario had ever seen it at home. It was filled with stars, which should have comforted him a little, except they were definitely not constellations he had ever seen before, and they were all shining with a wicked light. What would the rest of the Mushroom Kingdom say about this? They had always revered the stars so much. Mario was suddenly getting very nervous.
Guys,
he said warily as he looked around.
I don't think we're in Chronoside anymore. This is where King Shroud and the Darkstriders live.
Maisie wondered.
But what an awful place. And they want to make the rest of the world this way.
Mario kept staring around, getting more and more uneasy. Not only did the whole place look wrong, it felt wrong. There was a supernatural chill in the air that was screaming at him to leave, and the sky seemed to be pressing down on everything like a thick black blanket, smothering out all life. This was not the way night was supposed to be.
This is what Chronoside will be like. If he wins.
Suddenly a chilling thought occurred to him. He quickly reached for the Aeon hourglass and pulled it out. And his heart immediately sank. He could already tell something was wrong with it. Its gold seemed to have faded, and the silver sand inside of it was no longer bright and glimmering, but dark and dull. It looked just like an ordinary hourglass now. Taking a deep breath, Mario turned it over, and just as he had dreaded, nothing happened. The sand fell through the glass, but there was no glowing, no bright flash, and most of all, the group stayed exactly where they were. The hourglass couldn't bring them from night to day, because day didn't exist here.
This can't be good,
he whispered, beginning to think things couldn't get any worse. Of course, he was wrong.
Hey guys!
Everyone turned to look at Hanner.
Where's Riz?
Mario jolted and looked around, realizing along with everyone else that she was nowhere to be found.
I don't rightly believe it. That gal done stranded us here.
Snatchel said angrily.
But now how are we gonna get back home?
Cried Stubba.
I don't know.
Mario realized, getting a chill all over as he did.
Maybe. Hopefully when we find that last Sun Soul, everything will get straightened out. Speaking of which, dude,
Ferdinand spoke up.
Didn't the green chick say we're supposed to be looking in a fortress? I'm not espying one of those right now. Well, it's gotta be around here somewhere. And it won't be hard to find in a place like this,
said Mario.
Come on, guys. We should hurry.
So they set off across the wasteland, though it looked the same in every direction and they really had no idea whether they were going the right way at all. But Mario couldn't bring himself to stop, or even think very rationally as they went. He could only think about one thing. King Shroud has Peach. He has her, and if we don't save her he's going to. No. We're saving her. We have to. We just have to. Apart from the trees and shrubs, the only other features of the landscape were occasional rocky mesas, as staunchly pale as everything else under the sky. The only enemies to be found around here were Swoopulous. Or so it seemed at first.
Waaaaaughh!
Hanner shrieked as a seemingly dead tree suddenly reached down and grabbed her in a spindly branch of a hand, then snapped back up and started flailing her back and forth.
Hanner!
Mario cried as he raced up underneath her.
What is that thing? It's a treevil,
Gwynplaine grumbled as he looked at his phone.
They make themselves look like normal trees, then when people go walking by they grab 'em up and start ripping 'em apart. They do what?
Mario screamed, yanking out his hammer and taking care of the treevil in record speed. As it let out a shudder and collapsed into timber, Hannah fell to the ground with a painful thud.
Ow! Thanks, Mario,
she groaned.
This whole place is backwards. Everything's trying to get rid of us,
Delia whimpered nervously.
Which is why we're finding that fortress before anything else happens,
Mario said decisively, hauling Hannah back to her feet. So they kept on going through the imposing darkness, being careful to stay away from any trees this time. As they went, though, Mario began to suspect they were going in the right direction after all. Because the farther they went, the more tense he began to feel.
Hey, what's up there?
Hannah asked after a long while, and he looked up and realized that the ground several yards ahead of them suddenly dropped off. Though they couldn't see all the way to the bottom from here, they saw that the ground rose back up a large distance away, and it seemed to form a curved slope as it did. They were walking directly toward what looked like a huge crater. Mario quickly came to a stop.
Whoa! I think we found something.
Ever so slowly and cautiously, the group of heroes walked up to the edge and peered over, gazing down at what was below them. As they did, the temperature around them seemed to drop several more degrees.
We made it,
Mario said quietly.
We're here.
Several dozen feet below them, standing in the middle of the crater, was King Shroud's fortress. It was just how Mario had expected it to be, tall, stark, cold, and militaristic. It was made out of bricks of grey stone and had a row of small windows circling its walls above a set of huge wooden double doors. There were several dark striders pacing back and forth across the battlements, on the lookout for anyone who might be trying to sneak inside. Not only that, but there were dozens of dark striders gathered around the courtyard in front of the fortress as well. They seemed to be mobilizing, or running through a drill, or something similar. In any case, it was clear that just walking in through the front door was now completely out of the question. Mario's heart sank. Peach's only hope was in there. But what could they do? How would they reach it now?
This don't look good,
Snatchel muttered as they all peered down.
How do you reckon we're getting in there? And what are they gonna do if they catch us?
Stubba said nervously, suddenly realizing along with the others how very likely that was.
They're not going to catch us. Remember, if worse comes to worst, we've got a duplicate.
Mario said before turning to face his partners.
Okay guys. We're definitely not making it in through the front. On the count of 3, we run down to the backside of the fortress as fast as we can, before anybody sees us. Got it?
They all nodded. Mario turned and looked back at the fortress, fixing his gaze on it.
1. 2. Hey. Whoa!
Mario was so startled that he immediately lost his balance, flailing his arms frantically before falling over and barely stopping himself before he tumbled into the crater.
Mario! Are you okay?
Asked Delia, only to turn around with the other partners and realize who had just shouted at Mario and startled him.
You're all the new recruits, aren't you?
Asked the very thick, heavy-set Dark Strider who was suddenly standing among them.
You're the ones King Shroud called in to guard the fortress while he's away.
Mario stared at him. His immediate terror at having been discovered slowly abated as he realized this Dark Strider had no idea who they were.
What are you all doing lollygagging up here?
The Dark Strider demanded, not even waiting for an answer.
We've been waiting for all of you long enough. With all of our Lord's forces infiltrating the Temple of the Sun, we need as many people as we can back here.
Mario was still at a loss.
Oh, sorry.
The Dark Strider just shook his head.
Ugh, you can't find good help these days. Go on, get down there. Orientation starts immediately.
He gave Mario a shove, causing the plumber to stumble a good way down the slope of the crater before finally catching himself and walking the rest of the way down. His partners quickly followed after him.
This is bad, right?
Ferdinand said quietly as they all glanced uneasily back at their captor, who was following them down without taking his eyes off of them.
But why do they think we're working for Shroud if we're not Dark Striders?
Hannah whispered.
Well, Dark Striders aren't the only species living around here. We sort of found that out the hard way. But guys, don't panic, okay?
Said Mario, looking around and making sure he wasn't overheard.
They don't seem to know who we are, so let's just play along and maybe we can fake our way in there. This might be easier than we thought.
Naturally, he was wrong. Several minutes later, Mario and his partners were all standing in a row in front of the entrance to the fortress, self-consciously trying to keep their backs as straight as possible, except Gwynplaine, who couldn't even be bothered, as their commanding officer paced back and forth in front of them. Standing in rows along with them were dozens of nasty-looking dark striders, and a few other creatures besides. Mario's guess had been right, there were other species living in this dark dimension, and it seemed that King Shroud had them in his service as well. Unfortunately for Mario and his friends, most of them looked like something you would find by flipping over a rock. Stubba was whimpering and trying to edge away as he found himself standing in front of what looked like a black, hairy wiggler with sharp fangs and too many eyes.
Now listen up, recruits,
said the officer as he continued to pace.
I'm sure you are all aware of the importance of your task. You have all been selected by King Shroud for a reason. He has left this fortress under our watch while he seizes control of the Temple of the Sun. You must be prepared to guard this fortress with your lives if necessary.
Most of the other recruits grew determined, serious looks on their faces. Mario glanced around at them, feeling more awkward than ever.
As you have been informed, King Shroud's great treasure, the seventh Sun Soul, is being guarded within our fortress. It is absolutely crucial that this Sun Soul be properly guarded, as our Lord cannot be here to guard it himself. Hang on a minute,
Mario spoke up as a thought suddenly entered his head. He almost immediately regretted it, as the officer and all the other recruits immediately turned to look at him.
It's just,
he said timidly.
We heard that King Shroud already found somebody to guard the Sun Soul. You wouldn't happen to know who that is, would you?
The officer glared at Mario.
That does not concern any of you. And anyway, we still require every available set of hands to guard this fortress. So don't even think of slacking off, or you may expect to face our Lord's wrath. If all goes as planned, the accursed owner of this Sun Soul will soon be gone from this world forever, and our Lord will be free to shape the entire world in an image of ours. A world of only darkness.
The other recruits all roared in agreement. It was all Mario could do not to go berserk at his talking about Peach like that, but he managed.
No longer will we be confined to this frigid wasteland, rotting away in a forgotten corner of the world.
The officer went on with a sudden zeal.
Under our Lord's guidance, the entire world will soon be fit for us to live in. With the destruction of day, this world will be ours.
Mario winced at the loud cheering as the recruits started jumping up and down in excitement. Hannah had to uneasily inch away from the one standing nearest her, who was some sort of mixture of a dog and a gargoyle, complete with leathery wings. But if Shroud really does win, the whole world will become a wasteland like this one, Mario thought glumly. It won't be fit for anyone to live in.
But this vision will only become a reality if you all do your jobs,
the officer concluded.
So don't screw anything up. Yeah, that sounds great. We can't wait.
Mario said shortly, getting desperate to get out of here as fast as we could.
So I guess we'll just head in the fortress and get to work, hey? Not so fast,
said the officer, stepping in front of Mario and making him wince.
No recruits are allowed inside the fortress without first completing the training course. We need to make sure our sentries are capable, after all. Once you've completed the course, you'll be issued your weapon and granted access inside.
Mario stared at him.
Training course? Yes, you idiot. That training course.
The officer said impatiently, pointing at something to their left. Mario and the other recruits turned and found themselves staring up at a huge, seemingly impossible obstacle course. While some of the other recruits looked excited, Mario quickly balked at the sight of it.
We have to finish that? Unless you would prefer being relieved of your duty. If you can't complete something as simple as this, you are clearly unfit to serve our Lord. Oh, fine,
Mario groaned. It was times like this he wished he weren't quite so chubby.
Hey, no sweat, man,
said Ferdinand, giving Mario another slap on the back.
We'll all be here for emotional support, right dudes? Excuse me, but I think you misheard me,
the officer said sternly.
I said all of you must complete the course.
Ferdinand paused for a moment.
Oh. Bummer, man.
And the next thing Mario knew, he and all the other recruits were running the course. It was every bit as unpleasant as he had anticipated.
Are you doing all right, Mario?
Maisie called over. They were currently hopping across a series of tall, wide wooden poles that were spaced far apart from each other. Falling off would mean a very painful drop.
Oh. Yeah. I'm doing great.
He muttered through gritted teeth as he bent his short legs and sprang from one pole to the next.
They don't call me Jumpman for nothing. I didn't know they called you Jumpman at all,
said Julia, who was having a much easier time due to her floating ability.
Couldn't we have just taken a written exam?
Hannah whimpered as she stood on one foot atop one of the poles, frantically flailing her arms. The weight of her shell was definitely not helping her keep balance.
One side, hammerhead.
Gwynplaine snapped as he came hopping up next to her, shoving her out of the way to make room for himself. Hannah shrieked as she toppled off the pole, only to grab onto the ledge at the last second and find herself dangling off the ground. Gwynplaine just went hopping on ahead without even looking back.
Gwynplaine! Don't you even care about?
Mario quickly fell silent and shook his head impatiently. Of course Gwynplaine didn't care. He had proven that numerous times over the past few weeks. The next part of the course involved scaling a tall brick wall with nothing but a rope to climb up. Everyone else was visibly struggling, but when Mario saw what was ahead he just put on a sly grin and wall jumped up the whole thing, leaving everyone, including his partners, glaring after him. After that, they had to walk across a narrow rope that was suspended several feet above the ground. That wouldn't have been so hard if it weren't for the fact that lining the rope on both sides were a row of bullet bill blasters. Mario grew pale at the sight of it.
You've gotta be joking.
Nonetheless, they valiantly plowed through it one at a time. Stubba had the easiest time since he was so short and close to the ground, the wild volley of bullet bills usually firing right over his head. Ferdinand blithely dodged every one of them by flapping into the air, and Hannah somehow got it into her head to whack the offending bullet bills away with her hammer. That didn't work out too well.
I hate my life,
she muttered after making it across on her 5th try.
Okay, that wasn't so hard,
said Mario once the group had all gathered together.
So now all we have left to do is
He was cut off as an enormous thwomp suddenly came crashing to the ground just inches in front of his face. He and his partners looked and realized that there was a line of at least a dozen thwomps rising and falling at odd intervals. And they would have to run through all of them. Mario stared at the gauntlet in front of them.
Anyone have a suggestion? Don't screw up.
Gwynplaine sneered. The entire group glanced uneasily at each other, then turned, took a collective breath, and ran through the rising and falling thwomps while screaming at the top of their lungs. When it was all over, Mario was sprawled on the ground next to his partners, panting heavily and not even attempting to salvage his dignity.
Well, that was not the most pleasant thing we've done,
Maisie sighed wearily as she sat on the ground.
Heh, I weren't scared,
Snatchel said with a tired grin, obviously not being truthful.
Well, congratulations. I didn't see that coming, but you all successfully completed the training course,
said the officer, standing with his hands behind his back and looking as stern as always.
Now whenever you feel like standing up, you may receive your weapon. Hey? Oh, right,
said Mario, reluctantly dragging himself to his feet with a groan.
This hammer will grant you access into King Shroud's fortress. Remember, your job is to guard the Sun Soul, and nothing else. Do not fail in this task.
Mario nodded obligingly, and the officer held out what would be Mario's final weapon. Mario got the Ultra Hammer. He can use this hammer to destroy metal blocks that are in his way. He can also use the Ultra Hammer in battle to do even more damage to enemies.
Oh. Terrific,
said Mario, suddenly brightening up quite a bit as he held his new hammer in his hands.
Thanks a lot. Yes, yes. Just hope for your sake you actually know how to use that thing.
The officer snapped, giving Mario a shove in the direction of the front entrance.
Now hurry up. Get in there and do your duty. Will do,
Mario muttered as he took off, his partners following him. Unfortunately, they arrived at a problem before they even got inside. As they arrived at the front entrance, they realized that the fortress itself was perched on top of a rocky ledge that was several feet high. The actual front doors were well above their heads, and they found themselves staring up, wondering what they were supposed to do.
He could have mentioned this before,
Hannah said irritably as she looked up.
Now how are we getting in?
Mario looked around thoughtfully, then turned around and suddenly noticed something he had missed. Directly behind them was a big metal block, colored red with golden edges.
I've got a pretty good idea,
he said. His partners watched as he walked up to the metal block, then wound up his brand new ultra hammer as tightly as he could. And swung it directly at the block, smashing it to pieces.
Whoa,
Stubbs said in admiration.
I never get tired of doing that,
Mario said with a sheepish grin. Sure enough, as soon as the block was destroyed, a green warp pipe suddenly popped out of the ground in its place. Exchanging glances and deciding there was nothing else they could do, the group finally shrugged amongst each other and jumped into the pipe. When they re-emerged, they came jumping out of another pipe that had just risen up several feet above where they had been standing, directly in front of the main entrance to the fortress.
Well, here we are,
Mario sighed as they all stared up at the double doors.
We made it. One last Sun Soul. And it's in there somewhere.
He swallowed hard, feeling reluctant to move. He was afraid of going in there and finding out what King Shroud had lying in wait for them. He had a feeling it was worse than anything they had faced so far.
Don't worry, Mario,
Julia said encouragingly.
I mean, you got us all this far, right? I know you'll get us through this too. Yeah. I'm not scared, Mario.
Stubbs said loyally. Mario smiled weakly at them.
All right. Well, I hope you guys are right. Here goes nothing.
He said, turning to look back up at the doors. Don't worry, Peach. We're finding that Sun Soul. And then we're coming for you. Taking a deep breath and steeling himself, Mario reached out and pushed open the large wooden door, which responded with a loud creak. Together, he and his partners walked into King Shroud's fortress. As he wondered how, or if, they were ever getting back out. End of chapter.